म्यूट म्यूट
म्युटोरेस. ओके.
आता आलास.
नमस्कार मंडळी, मी प्रसाद अथणीकर, महाराष्ट्र मंडळ शिकागो 2023 चा अध्यक्ष. तुम्हा सर्वांचे आजच्या या फिटनेस क्लबच्या सेशन मध्ये स्वागत. हा खास आपण जो 18 जूनला 5K करणार आहोत त्याबद्दलचा सेशन आहे. द प्रिपरेशन अँड द ट्रेनिंग और एनी प्रिपरेटरी प्री-रिक्विजिट फॉर फिजिकल हेल्थ. तर मी आपले इसी लिएजन विशाल नवलकर यांना विनंती करतो की सेशन चालू करावे.
धन्यवाद प्रसाद. नमस्कार मंडळी, मी महाराष्ट्र मंडळ फिटनेस क्लबचा इसी लियाजन फॉर इयर 2023. हा महाराष्ट्र मंडळ शिकागोचा सेशन फिटनेस क्लब आणि आरोग्य धाम यांच्या जॉईंट अनुषंगाने आपण प्लॅन केलेला आहे. हा सेशन आपण आपल्या 5Kच्या तयारीसाठी ठेवलेला आहे आणि या सेशनच्या साठी मार्गदर्शन करायला आपल्याला शिकागो मधलेच आपले तज्ञ डॉक्टर आणि लोकल डॉक्टर आनंद देशपांडे हे आपल्याला मदत करणार आहेत. आनंदजी धन्यवाद. आनंद, तुमचं आणि हार्दिक स्वागत. त्यांच्याबद्दल थोडस ब्रीफ इंट्रोडक्शन सांगतो. Anand is experienced medical professional with a background in exercise, physiology, and rehabilitation. He has done his undergraduate degree in MBBS in India. He has also done master's degree in exercise physiology from North Illinois University, DeKalb, and he is also a doctor of physical therapy from Northwestern University, Chicago. He is currently employed at Schwab Rehabilitation Hospital and associated satellite clinics. आनंद, तुझं हार्दिक स्वागत आणि हे सत्र तुझ्या हातात मी सुपूर्द करतो. थँक्यू सो मच.
थँक्यू. वेलकम एव्हरीवन. मी सेशन मोस्टली इंग्लिश मध्येच म्हणजे इंग्लिश मध्ये एक्सप्लेन करायला थोडं इझी पडतं आणि मे बी आय मिक्स इंग्लिश अँड मराठी कॉम्बिनेशन ट्रू इंडियन स्टाईल. एक मिनिट, मी स्क्रीन शेअर करतो. Oh, it's disabled screen sharing म्हणतात.
एक मिनिट, मी तुला होस्ट करतो. सॉरी,
होस्ट कर.
येस केलं. येस, सॉरी. आता बघा ना. येस येस दिसतंय.
Very good.
Oh, we can see it.
Yes, perfect.
Actually, the intention basically was to give some introduction about exercising guidelines, and mostly to also prepare for the 5K, basic running, walking or running, and how to basically warm up, stretch, and how to follow a safe exercise pattern based on your health and medical conditions. Let me briefly, I will touch on some of these aspects, and if you have questions, you can ask during the session or at the end, or you're comfortable. These are ACSM recommendations, American College of Sports Medicine. All healthy adults 18 and above should participate in moderate intensity aerobic physical activity, which can be walking, jogging, running, bicycling, any of these aerobic physical activity for a minimum of 30 minutes per day, 5 days a week. Any vigorous intensive aerobic activity for a minimum of 20 minutes on 3 days a week. Based on your level of exertion, you can do that. You can divide it into that. So obviously, heavier exercising or people who are training for athletic activity, sport activity, they're obviously a little bit higher participation level. But in general, guidelines say that at least everybody should participate at least in this much of physical activity. And these are a few more recommendations. Ki cardiorespiratory fitness, basically just your exertion, endurance, stamina, and weight control, aerobic exercise 5 days a week, 20 to 60 minutes, 55 to 90% of maximum heart rate. And if the maximum heart rate, I'll touch on that in a little bit. 40 to 85% of maximum oxygen uptake reserve. How much oxygen basically you consume for each for the physical activity. That is a difficult thing to calculate, but that's just basically the guideline. That's calculated more accurately in a lab. But when we actually participate in physical activity, we want to at least use these general guidelines for physical activity, what we can actually calculate. The lower intensity exercise, people who cannot exercise, who otherwise are limited in activity, they should at least do fitness of 30 minutes or more, but at a lower intensity level if they can. But all adults at least should exercise at a moderate intensity exercise. And is some amount of muscle strengthening and endurance exercise for at least 2 days a week. And what happens basically is everybody thinks that walking and running is the only thing, or bicycling. All of these are good exercises. But what is recommended also is muscle strengthening is a very important part of exercising. So you should at least involve some amount of muscle strengthening, which doesn't always involve using heavy weights or anything, but at least some kind of resistance exercise, exercise bands, whatever you can use. So some amount of muscle strengthening is a good idea, and it helps prevent injuries and soreness from the physical activity that you do, that is even walking or running. So it's a very common thing. A lot of people participate in running, but they don't allow time to strengthen their legs. And as a consequence, I see a lot of injuries that people have, ankle injuries, knee-based injuries, or hip injuries because of lack of muscle strength. So that's why it's very important to involve some amount of muscle strengthening for at least 2 days a week. More is better. Hey, maximum heart rate. What is maximum heart rate? Basically, is 220 minus your age gives you a target heart rate. And the recommendation is to try and achieve at least 64 to 76% of that target heart rate when you exercise. Why is this important? When you walk, if you walk at a very slow pace, it's not that it's bad or anything, but if you really want to achieve some exercise, good outcomes of exercise from the walking that you do, then you should at least try to achieve that target heart rate. So how do you calculate the target heart rate is basically that formula. So for example, if you are 50 years old, 220 minus 50 is 170, your math is correct. And so if you calculate that 64 to 76%, that's 109 to 129 beats per minute. Now, are you going to be at between that heart rate for all the time? Not really, maybe. Initially, you may start very slow. Initially, the heart rate may not pick up to that level. But for at least a good part of the exercise, you should be within that target heart rate. When you cool down, obviously, the heart rate goes down. When you're warming up, the heart rate is not up there. So that's okay. But for the exercise intensity, you want that heart rate to be between that target heart rate.
आनंद,
हाँ.
एक प्रश्न विचारू का? आता हा टार्गेट हार्ट रेट आहे ना, म्हणजे आपण समजा इफ समवन इज रनिंग फॉर अ 5K, ठीक आहे, त्याला एकतर when do you know कि you have reached a threshold, like do you need to tone down or you just need to continue?
The target heart rate is a guideline, so it doesn't mean that if you achieved your target heart rate, you shouldn't exceed it. You can probably exceed it many times. If you are using a Fitbit or some kind of heart rate monitoring device, Apple Watch, or manually तुम्ही heart rate check करता ना तरी, it does not mean that you shouldn't exceed it or you shouldn't get like 80 to 90% of the heart rate. असं नहीं है. But हे काय की this is 64 to 76% is what is recommended. Like you should at least be within the target rate. असं आहे.
बरोबर.
आणि आणि काय it's hard to sometimes calculate that heart rate when you're walking fast. It's very hard to do two things at one time. म्हणून it's probably a good idea to kind of have some kind of heart rate monitoring device. But at a basic minimum, even if you can take like a general this thing of heart rate, or if you can check your pulse, की तुमचं काय actual total for a minute at least or 30 seconds, if you can get that heart rate, then you know at least that you're exercising at that intensity.
Sure.
So that's basically like a guideline.
Thank you.
नाही, आनंद एक प्रश्न विचारू
हा.
साधारण मॉडरेट ऍक्टिव्हिटी असं मी कुठेतरी वाचलं होतं की I mean, obviously, heart rate is important, but just that you cannot have a normal conversation. Basically, you will be have some difficulty with normal speaking. I guess, thoda you will be tired, or you should feel like you are having difficulty. Like if you're brisk walking, whatever exercise you're doing, that you're not at that comfortable zone anymore. I guess.
Right.
आणि the next slides I will actually talk about why sometimes heart rate. go ahead.
एक प्रश्न आहे, टार्गेटेड हार्ट रेट मध्ये जो सांगितलं ना फॉर्म्युला, तो मेल आणि फिमेल याच्यामध्ये काही फरक असतो की तो स्टँडर्ड असला पाहिजे?
नाही, स्टँडर्ड असतं, बिकॉज बेसिकली ते तुमच्या एक्सरसाइज, तुमच्या एज हे आणि टार्गेट हार्ट रेट काय आहे की हे एक्सरसाइज फिजिओलॉजीचा एक पार्ट आहे की दिस इज नॉट द ओनली and most accurate way of measuring it. This is more of a rough, easy way to use it, right? So actual तुमचं heart rate, तुम्ही जे एक्सरसाइज स्ट्रेस टेस्ट करतात जे हार्ट पेशंट्सला वगैरे किंवा टू रूल आउट कार्डियक हे प्रॉब्लेम्स, त्या ह्याच्यावर ते ऍक्च्युअल तुमचं हार्ट रेट किती आहे आणि किती ते टार्गेट हार्ट रेट ऍक्च्युअल कॅल्क्युलेट, दॅट इज मोर ऑफ अ करेक्ट वे. लॅबमध्ये जे करतात ना ते, दॅट इज मोर ऑफ अ ॲक्युरेट ऑब्वियस वे ऑफ चेकिंग युअर टार्गेट हार्ट रेट अँड युअर अबिलिटी टू एक्सरसाइज. But hey, this is a good formula to use, and it is definitely used equally across men and women. So it's not, there is no.
This is a good way, yeah.
But for a layman way of measuring this, obviously. Right? So target heart rate, and why is this important, and what are the drawbacks? Not drawbacks, but what are the limitations? I'll probably touch on some of those things too. And I'll actually go into that after this slide. But hey, basically, before you walk, what should you do? And why is, again, if you don't do any of this stuff, then the target heart rate becomes more of a limited tool, I guess, because this is very important. So adequate rest means 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Whatever you are used to, you should get a good night's rest. Don't get too nervous about winning the prize like Pranshu, but you should definitely, if you have sleep-related issues, definitely Pranshu is here. So, and then hydrate adequately, and enough water before. Not excessive hydration. असं नाही की आपण just because you're going to walk in a 70-degree weather, walk or run, you should over-hydrate. There's nothing like that. You can never over-hydrate and not drink enough on the day off. But hydrate adequately means you should make sure that you drink at least whatever is normal amount of water that you consume. And most runners and participants who engage in low to moderate exercise do not require any supplements. Say Gatorade, वगैरे जे बाकीचे जे हे असतात, usually don't need that kind of that amount of supplements basically. And aware of excess salt and sugar in drinks. Pushkar hai, a lot of these drinks are promoted for running and walking, but they are a lot of high in salt and sugar, so that's a negative thing too. And prescription medications, JK, whatever you are recommended, hypertension, diabetes, as well as whatever you're supposed to take, you should take them, because important thing is exercise tends to lower the blood sugar immediately. So if you skip breakfast, or if you have taken the medicine but you haven't really like eaten breakfast or didn't have time, it's a dangerous thing, because the exercise will lower the blood sugar and physiological increase hota. म्हणजे as normally the blood pressure just goes up anyway. It's supposed to go up with exercise, so you should take your medications. And this is one of the exercise physiology मध्ये हे use करतात. This is called दोन वेगळे scales आहेत, but I'm just going to briefly touch on these. I prefer the one on the right, the Borg rating of perceived exertion. Hey, basically this is a scale to use to know how you're exercising. Hey, je left side la hai, this is just a 10-point scale. Hey, this is a more of a modified way of using that. The one on the left, the 10-point scale is used for breathing. So how are you breathing? How is your breathing going on? So from a point of view of breathing, that's something that's used. So you should be somewhere between 2 to 3 on that, light to moderate, maybe touching up to 4 in some instances, especially if you're running. But you should not be too much beyond that as far as breathing is concerned. So that's a good way to kind of use that. And here, Borg rating of perceived exertion, the one on the right hand side, it's always recommended that you should be somewhere between 12 to 14 on that. So somewhat hard, even up to, I'd say, even up to 15, somewhat hard to hard, at least at the peak. Hey, this is more from a heart rate perspective. This Borg, the one on the right side is used more from a heart rate perspective. So they breathing and one is for heart rate. So if you are, it's a good measure of how your heart rate is going up and how you basically tolerate it. So you want to be somewhere between that 12 to 14. If it's getting too much beyond that 15 or 16, then you should definitely slow down, because that's how you are perceiving the exercise. And why is this important is if you are taking medications for hypertension or heart, like beta blockers, that will lower your heart rate. And बरेचसे आमचे patients असतात, they do exercise and all that, but the heart rate doesn't budge that much. It is probably 90 or 100. It doesn't go much more beyond that sometimes. But it doesn't mean that the person is not exercising. So he or she are definitely working pretty hard. So this is something that we sometimes use to say, what are you doing on this scale? So obviously, if they're saying I'm at 16 or 17, then definitely that is too much for them. Any questions about any of these? Yeah, mental picture to me, you can kind of use that as a see where am I when I'm exercising, especially in the middle of the walking or the running that you're doing. This is something that is a good guideline.
Okay. एक slide पाठी आपण गेलो तर basically this is sort of parallel, right? म्हणजे when you say that okay 13 on the right side, I feel somewhat tired. Is it equal to something on the left side or?
Not a strict correlation, but yeah, somewhat moderate. Maybe you should somewhere be between 3 to 4. Breathing and heart rate, sometimes you may not be breathing. You may be breathing fine. It may not be anything to do with it. Or you may be breathing a little heavy, but your heart rate may not be very high. So it may not exactly correlate, but it is how you perceive the exertion, basically. These are two different scales. One on the right is older one that's used. Hey, then I think they've done it a more recent one, the 10-point scale. But it's not a strict correlation.
Okay. ते दोन प्रश्न आहेत. एक सूर्यनमस्काराचा आहे, तो आय थिंक आपण नंतर घेऊया कारण की आपण आता पुढे आलोय. एक प्रश्न असा आहे की व्हॉट इज युअर रेकमेंडेशन फॉर पीपल विथ एफिब? मला माहिती नाहीये काय टर्म आहे. मयुरीजींचा क्वेश्चन आहे.
People with AFib?
AFib.
Atrial fibrillation. Atrial fibrillation is basically like it's a cardiac arrhythmia. The atrial fibrillation, if you are a patient in the atrial fibrillation, you definitely have to be on medical managed care. You should, hopefully you are under care of a cardiologist and taking medicine.
Yes. Sorry, मी मयुरी बोलते. मी आहे cardiologist ची patient आहे. But I just wanted to know if I'm walking, what is your heart rate recommendation and all that, because I do get breathless sometimes.
So if you have had a stress test, have you had a stress test in the past and any time?
Couple of years ago.
So if you have had a stress test and they have ruled out any major issues related to that, and if you are managed well on medical care, then I don't think light exercise should be a problem, because they stress test if you have done, if you walk on a treadmill, that is, if you have done that kind of a cardiac stress test, then it is actually quite intense. And I used to do this cardiac stress test
Yeah.
years ago. So that is pretty intense exercise. And if you are able to tolerate that, and if you have not had any cardiac,
Right.
your blood pressure has responded well, you have not had any symptoms, then you are okay to do at
Yeah.
least light to moderate amount of exercise, because hey, this is at a much lower level. When you walk even for longer distances, your heart rate doesn't go.
Right. Right.
They-
Go up. Yeah. I have been walking like 10,000 steps every day. But when I'm walking and talking, that's when the issue comes up that I'm breathless. So,
Yeah, Zunik, there is one more thing they say. It's called a talk test. So when you are engaged in any kind of exercise, the talk test are you able to have a conversation with someone? Like, not like a long conversation, but at least are you able to talk to them? If you're exercising and say, "Oh, I need to do this," or "I'm doing this," or like a short, few sentences.
Right.
It's called a talk test. If you're able to do that, that means you're not completely like out of breath, or you're able to tolerate that exercise well.
Okay.
So that is also something you think about.
Yeah, so walking should be okay then. Taking part is okay.
Yes, I think walking should be okay, and especially if your cardiologist has done a stress test and they have ruled out.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Exercise.
Sure.
In fact, it's a good. Even with cardiac issues, exercise is always recommended. म्हणून cardiac rehab check करतात. I used to work in cardiac rehab years ago. It is a recommended thing for people who have had cardiac issues, illnesses, post stent or bypass surgery. Hey, why? Because the heart is a muscle, basically. The heart requires the exercise to get stronger and to respond to the challenges of supplying blood to different areas of the body when you are exposed to any kind of exercise activity.
Yeah.
So doing exercise, actually, if it's within control, if it is well monitored, is a good thing. It will help strengthen that part.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
And prior to participation, always important to perform some amount of warm-up or stretching. And here, the idea behind today's presentation, what we would do, this is leading up to that aspect. Our content is more of a medical aspect to it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So prior to participation in run and walk, it is important to perform some amount of warm-up or stretching. So why is this important? Is when you do a warm-up, and just to kind of diverge a little bit, people call everything as stretching. So stretching is something that you usually should do after exercising. And there is research to show that stretching, it's not a bad thing, nothing wrong with it, but stretching is always better done after the exercise, the end of exercise. Warm-up is something that you do to prepare for the exercise, right? So it's not all stretching, right? So why is warm-up important? Warm-up is important because it helps the heart to gradually increase its activity level to respond to that exercise that you're about to do, which is going to be much more than the warm-up, hopefully. So as you do the warm-up, what happens is the blood flow increases, the heart responds to that slightly increased challenge, and that blood flow is improved to the target organs, especially brain, kidneys, other target organs, whatever, the muscles especially. All of these larger muscles, especially leg muscles, are the larger muscles that are involved. So all of this improves the blood flow to these areas. So that warm-up is an absolutely important aspect. You should never participate in exercise right away, even if you are a healthy adult with no issues, no medical issues. Always recommended to do a warm-up because it prevents injuries and helps your body transition to exercise normally. And so what happens is, for normal walking, if I'm walking from here, if I'm going downstairs, coming up, or walking short distances, the cardiovascular system is able to manage that much of workload. So, but if I want to do a 5K, if you're going to run or something, then definitely that warm-up is important because the heart needs to be able to respond much better. So, hey, pre-exercise warm-up, some examples. I'm not going to include everything in it, but some good warm-up stretches that you can do. And I wanted to include the kinds of warm-up or stretching that most people are able to perform, obviously, depending on who you are and how well your balance is, how active you are. You can hopefully get some ideas from these. But if you have any questions about how to modify something, or if you're not able to do any of these, definitely I'm here. So quad stretch, hey, quadriceps is the muscle that's on the front of your thigh. The large muscle that actually has 4 different parts to it. When it's quad, it's a 4. It's a 4 different, the muscle itself, it's 4 different muscles, but it's grouped into one. While in standing position, you can bend your knee like this, hold the stretch, you can hold on to a support. If you don't need a support, great, but if you can hold on to that support and stretch like that, that's a quad stretch. You want to pull your knee into a bent position until a good stretch is felt on the front of your thigh. Just stretching, why? How much of a stretch? People always say, I don't know if I'm doing enough, am I overdoing it? So you want to stretch until you feel a good amount of stretch. There's nothing wrong with, there's no more or less. If you're able to stretch a little bit more, especially after doing the first set, definitely do more of a stretch. But as long as you feel a good amount of stretch on the muscle, that's good enough. Every stretch you want to hold for at least 30 seconds. Why 30 seconds? Is because there is research to show that a stretching for 30 seconds is the minimum. The muscle responds better to that stretch. There is more long-lasting effect of it. So when you hold it for like 5 or 10 seconds, it may be a good amount of stretch for that time, but it may not be effective enough. A quad stretch. And here some of these examples more of glute stretch. Hey, people who cannot stand up and do this stretch can also do it in lying down. Hip flexors, the one that you use for marching, basically like in the second picture. If you can do it, definitely raise the knee up. You can grasp with both arms, pull it towards your chest. If you feel a good stretch, you let it down, and you use the opposite leg. If you can do it lying down, same idea. You can stretch it into your chest if you can. Whatever you can do, if you can go further, definitely get a good amount of stretch. And again, hey, standing one, it's an exception. You cannot hold it for 30 seconds, but it's if you can at least hold it for like 15 seconds, it's a good amount of stretch. You may have to repeat it for a few steps just to get that enough amount of stretch. Hey, lateral hip glide mantatala. Basically, you can put your legs apart and lean away from that stretch. So it's basically to stretch the hip muscles. Hey, usually you should feel a little bit of a stretch on the hip region, hip muscles, hip abductors, and mantat. You can stretch those muscles and you can glide forward and also into a half circle. So basically, you can stand and like circle around the hip. I'll say you can stretch and do that too. That's one. Hey, this is also a good stretch that you can do. You can stretch sideways like this on each leg. Both sides you can do that. Go up to the middle and stretch to the sides. Again, if you can hold it for a longer period, it would be good. Any questions? This other one.
एक प्रश्न इथे डॉक्टर अडावडकर ने विचारलाय 30 seconds at a time or okay to get 30 seconds in 2 to 3 repetitions.
If it is challenging enough, if you cannot hold it, but definitely the time, at least the total time should equal 30 seconds if you can. That would be a better idea. If you can hold the stretch, then at one stretch, if you can hold it for 30 seconds, it's definitely recommended. But if you cannot, obviously, because of balance and because of fatigue or strength issues, if you cannot hold it in one stretch for 30 seconds, then you can definitely repeat it enough number of times so you can get enough. The half kneel stretch म्हणतात. Yeah, अजून एक आहे का प्रश्न?
नाही, अजून नाही.
हाफ नील स्ट्रेच हे एक्सरसाइज वॉर्म अप साठी आणि हे डायनामिक स्ट्रेच म्हणतात. हे जे पिक्चर आहे सेकंड खाली बॉटम राईट हँड साइड, डायनामिक स्ट्रेच दॅट्स लाईक हॉपिंग आणि इट्स ऑलमोस्ट लाईक marching on one leg. So it's like you're using your arms and legs to bring the hip up, and almost like you're running but with a high march. I wish we had some maybe videos to show it, but hey, that is more of a challenging one that's used more for runners. Hey, bottom right hand side hota for those who are used to running. So you can kind of like use your arms and legs. So arms are going up, alternate arms. So right arm and left leg as a warm up. So kind of like almost like you're hopping and on one leg and marching. Hey, these are all simple ones. Walking in place. Hey, to me, you can walk in place and just like march in place and do some shoulder rolls. Arms are not, the focus is not, but when you're walking and running, your arms are definitely moving a lot. I mean, that creates a little bit of a soreness. So just doing some shoulder circles in a circular pattern, stretching out, that's a good way to kind of stretch those shoulder muscles. Just arm circles, just extending your arms out like that and basically circling them forward and backward, just like that. Helps to kind of move those large muscles of the neck and back and shoulder muscles.
आनंद, एक क्वेश्चन है सुजीत सा. For herniated disc patients, what exercises you will recommend for running?
So herniated disc, if you have active problems like pain radiating, म्हणजे हे shooting down म्हणतात ना, legsला जे आपण sciatica म्हणतो किंवा when you have radiating pain, then the first thing you should do is basically you should consult your physician and possibly get treated from a physical therapist, because walking is not a bad thing for it, but it can be stressful because the standing position, the upright position, that can cause that pain to kind of get worse sometimes. Because the upright position or standing position is bad for it, it's just that the underlying issue, the disc problem that people have, sometimes there is irritation of the nerve. Any activity will irritate it. If you sit for a long time or you stand up, the pain is going to happen. But if you have those active problems and if it is making it more difficult to stand or walk, a strong recommendation would be first to kind of make sure that is taken care of medically first, and then definitely for physical therapist. Most cases of back pain, more than 90%, do not require any injections or surgery or anything. So they are treatable.
So Anand, I don't have any pain is not there. There is a numbness. But like if, as you rightly said, like if I sit for 3 hours continuously, then I have a pain in the legs. But to just like you had shown some exercise to strengthen the lower muscles. Like apart from that, do you have any specific exercise you will recommend? Because I want to run this 5K. And I'm able to run at least 20-22 minutes without any issues. But if I cross 25, then I feel some pain. So just want, like, I realized that I was making a mistake, that not doing the strengthening exercise, which I will start from next week, like 2 days a week. But like any specific you will recommend, it will be great help.
So it's how you respond to that exercise and how you can get your back and some exercise. Because the thing is, back pain is the back pain is a treatable thing. It requires more like an evaluation from a physical therapist. It's very hard to kind of suggest any general exercises for it, because if you do general exercises, it's not a bad thing for your legs and anything, but some of these exercises can actually provoke that pain. So for example, if you do that hip flexion stretch that I was showing in the previous slide, this one on the left hand side might be a good stretch for the hip, but might actually provoke your back pain. So what I would recommend is, there is instead of getting a more specific exercise or anything, there is something that you want to be evaluated from for that. But in the meanwhile, the only thing that I would recommend basically is to avoid sitting for long periods of time. If you are sitting down, you should use a lumbar roll, like a roll behind your back, not a pillowcase, like a roll behind your back to kind of position your back and to sit with good posture. And you should always interrupt that sitting position at least every 20 minutes, walk around a little bit, and then come back to sitting if you can, because that sitting is what basically irritates that back area. But if you can, definitely participate in the exercise. If you can walk, you can run that much, definitely you'll be able to walk and exercise. If you need to take a break in between the walking, if you need to sit down for a few seconds, or if you want to stretch out, definitely do that, I would recommend. But it's I would strongly recommend getting evaluation if you can for your back.
Okay, thanks.
आनंद, अजून एक क्वेश्चन आहे, प्रश्न आहे रत्नांगीचा. If there is a knee pain or joint pain sometimes, what care should be taken during warm up of 5K?
So if you have knee pain or any other this thing, it is definitely important, again, very important to warm up, because joint related pain can actually worsen if you initiate activity suddenly. If you do the warm up and you gradually increase the walking and build up the speed slowly, then you should be able to tolerate that knee pain better. But if the knee pain is to the extent that it's bothering you to continue walking, or if you're limping or leaning on one side, then it's better to take a rest break sitting down before you resume the walking, I would say.
Okay. Thank you, Anand.
So Anand, this is Prashant Koginbar.
Oh.
So usually I go for a walk or sometimes run. Usually the target is to close by 10,000 steps. But every day morning or sometimes throughout the day, मला गुडघ्यापासून खाली जे लेग साइड ते पेन होत राहत.
थोड़ा आवाज ब्रेकअप होता था. Can you say that?
हॅलो.
Yeah.
हा, माझं नाव प्रशांत गोविंदबार आहे. मी बेसिकली रोज सकाळी मॉर्निंगला वॉक किंवा समटाइम्स रनिंगला जातो. मला गुडघ्यापासून खालचा जो पोर्शन आहे ना पायाचा, तिथे समवॉट पेन होत राहतं.
अच्छा.
सो
शिन पेन म्हणतात त्याला. हे फ्रंट ऑफ म्हणजे हे लोअर लेगच्या त्या भागात म्हणतात.
येस 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 येस.
हा, त्याला शिन म्हणतात, ते शिन पेन म्हणतात. ते युजली ते काय असतं, इफ इट्स अ मसल रिलेटेड प्रॉब्लेम, ते when you walk for or stand for longer distances, that gets irritated, so you start getting shin pain, that pain in that region.
Okay.
So again, if you do proper warm up and stretching, and if you are able to walk for longer distances with less pain, that might be a good idea. That might be helpful. But if you're having a lot of pain that limits you from walking for longer distances, then I would say you should definitely get it evaluated more thoroughly.
नाही, ते लॉंगर पेन नाही आहे. I can make 10,000 or more than that, but ते थोडंसं जाणवत राहतं. आणि मी ऍक्च्युली आय एम अ डायबेटिक पेशंट, तर त्याचं काही रिलेशन नाहीये ना?
त्याचं काय रिलेशन आहे डायबिटीज मध्ये? असं यू डोंट गेट दॅट काइंड ऑफ सिम्पटम स्पेसिफिकली. पुष्कळदा डायबिटीज कंट्रोल नसलं वगैरे तर त्याला काय असं नमनेस वगैरे असं, किंवा असं हे सेन्सेशन हे वगैरे कमी होतं, किंवा यू फील दॅट काइंड ऑफ हे सेन्सरी इश्यूज. पण पेन इज नॉट, it's not necessarily anything to do with diabetes. It is not that if you're not a diabetic that you won't feel pain. It's nothing to do directly with that.
Okay.
What I feel is kadi when you have if changing footwear also can be helpful. If you're walking in sandals or some kind of slippers, then using proper shoes, and that goes for any of these exercises, or definitely for the 5K. You should use proper shoes, proper footwear. If that is something that you can change and see if that has any effect, that's a big one.
I started using A6 running shoes. But let's see. Okay, I will follow some warm up and stretching which you prescribed or suggested.
Yeah. And if it persists, if it is causing a lot of pain, even if you walk for longer distance, if you take a short break, you should be able to continue. And there is nothing like saying that you shouldn't be walking 10,000 steps or you shouldn't be walking that much. That's not how it should work. But if you are having pain, especially if you walk for some distance, or if the pain starts coming earlier on, even if you walk for shorter distances, then definitely that is something to be assessed.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Vishal, Anand, can I ask one more question follow to this discussion?
Sure.
Hey, Anand, like as Prashant rightly said that, so we have specific running shoes. So do you recommend any specific running shoes?
There is nothing like that. There is I personal this thing, I like New Balance because I have them. I've used them for many years. But it's nothing like that. I wouldn't recommend any particular brand or anything. But shoes that are that fit you properly, that have a good, obviously, the sole and everything. If it's an old shoe, if the sole is kind of like, if there is the elasticity of the shoe is kind of getting worse, if there is a lot of wear and tear, especially if you see too much wear and tear on one side, it's recommended that you should change the shoes. There is and there is a common myth saying that people can say how your running is based on how the wear and tear of the shoe is. That's really not very accurate, but as long as you're using proper good running shoes with the lace that you're able to kind of secure it tightly, I think it's fine. There's no particular brand or anything like that, but I personally like New Balance, if that helps. I don't know.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Because I use Hoka Bondi 8, and like they basically mentioned that these shoes are like, Hoka is approved by the orthopedic foundation of US. I don't know what's true. That's the reason I was taking your expert opinion.
Yeah, hey, these are all.
आपल्याला पुढे काही सोल वगैरेचं आहे का डिस्कशन?
नाही, शूजचं मी काय particularly, just because I didn't want to get too much into detail. I didn't.
Anand, माझं म्हणजे obviously I don't know how accurate this is, but me before I started running, मी ते इकडे नेपरविल रनिंग नेपरविल काहीतरी आहे शॉप. So they apparently, I don't know how accurate it is, but त्यांनी मला 2 different shoes दिले, and मग they make you run in the thing. They see how you run and how your step and whatever, and then they kind of guide you.
They basically they take your video.
They help you, yeah. They take your video. They see your step and how your whatever, the way you land and whatnot, and then they kind of recommend. Now, obviously, you make the final decision, but that's how they help me.
No, that is a good thing. But the thing is, and I remember many years ago, I also had done that on a treadmill to see. But again, not everybody runs on the treadmill, and the surface that you run on is different. Like if you go running in Bussy Woods, it's not going to be all even like that, right? So, or anywhere else, Bussy Woods might be better, but if you go running on the sidewalk or anywhere, or in the city, it might be very different. So running surface will matter, and how you run will matter. So there is a limitation on how somebody can prescribe this for you just based on running on a treadmill. Unless that's the only time you run then on a treadmill, then maybe. But so it's not a bad thing. But again, you have to realize that there is only a limited amount of information that they're getting when you run on a treadmill for a very short period of time. How do you run when you're tired, when you're fatigued? When your injuries happen most commonly when you're fatigued. And most marathon runners also will tell you that they do great on the first leg, but then when they start getting fatigued, that's when injuries happen. So who is monitoring for fatigue and who is monitoring for changes in running style on different surfaces, right? But yeah, it's not a bad idea to kind of get that and do a short practice run to see how it feels actually on that running. So I definitely don't think it's a bad thing, but it's something that you want to learn through experience. How does this shoe help support me? Is it pushing my ankle in a particular direction? Is that sole insole a good fit for me? If you require inserts that help you because of the way your foot is shaped, who's looking for the shape of the foot? If your arch height, foot arch, and if it is very reduced, do you require inserts then? Then how does this shoe help you if you require inserts, right? So there's a lot of factors in that.
Yeah, sure.
And if you can get good fitting shoes, and if you can run in them and see if that feels good, then yeah, I would say that's a better way of taking it rather than getting it in a box and then trying to run on it. And then you have problems with that. Hopefully that helps. Yeah, but I don't think that. So again, the recommendation from a particular organization for any brand or anything, I'm always very skeptical about that, because who has given that recommendation? How have they arrived at that recommendation? It's like, Amitabh Bachchan going on TV and selling some atta or something, like, I don't know. It's kind of like that. So, but there is obviously a little bit more, I'm not saying it's the same thing, but there is a little bit more, slightly more validity to that, because some organization is willing to put their name on it. So hopefully, but again, I'm a little skeptical of these.
चालेल, आपण पुढे
So walking, running, hey, these are all common sense things sometimes, but sometimes we don't do it. Sometimes in a group, when you are running or walking, you see the person going ahead fast and you start to kind of go at their pace or the pace of somebody else. You walk slower because somebody else has to walk with you. So, but whatever, even if you adjust that pace, always start off slow, progress to a brisk walking pace. If you're using any devices like a cane or walker, you should definitely use them for the walk. Definitely use them even if you're normally using them. There is nothing, no recommendation ever to say that you should not be using it for a longer walk or you should not be using it any under circumstances. If you're running, you should always start with a slow walk, progress to a jog, because again, that period of warm up, that specific warm up for the activity, any sport or any activity, the warm up should be specific to that sport. If you are going to go in a bicycling thing competition, obviously you're starting to kind of like pedal, you're working on those motions, you're starting off. Just like that, if you're running, you want to start with the brisk walk, progress to the run or jog, and adjust your speed as you're able to. Initially, there is a period when your body is trying to catch up with that exercise. So you might feel suddenly very fatigued or tired, or your heart rate or your breathing goes up. That's very common, and this happens to a lot. It still happens to me many times if I'm running. But if you are able to manage, if you're able to get over that, then you are able to continue the exercise at that pace. But if you start off very fast, then you start to get fatigued too fast and you cannot continue that pace. And if you cannot continue and you force yourself, you are likely to get hurt. So always start off with that slow pace. Slow down, sorry, that's spelling error there. So if you want to slow down that pace, if you're getting too tired, yeah, definitely do that. Use the RPE scale if you can physically use that to see where you are at that workload. If you're still at that 12 to 14 level or the 2 to 4 on that other one. How is your breathing? If you're watching for your target heart rate, especially if you are able to monitor it, then that's definitely a good idea. Drink water as needed. I'll again only recommend water, nothing else. And then the sweating, it's a natural way of cool down for the body. So if you're sweating excessively, then it's okay to take a break and continue. So the body is trying to cool down. It doesn't mean that sweating is a bad thing or something wrong, something else is happening. Based on the temperature and based on your exertion, it's completely normal. But that's why also you need water. So that at the end, you want to start cooling down. You want to slow down. Obviously, I'm not saying that if you are competitively doing this or if you want to get to a certain point, you're not going to slow down before you reach the end of the 5K. But what this means is more for a general exercise. But at the end of the 5K, you definitely want to kind of walk around a little bit, not sit down immediately after you exercise, because the heart rate is at an elevated level. And if you sit down or lie down quickly, it just drops very fast, unnatural slowdown of the heart rate. So you want to slow the heart rate down just like you increased it during the warm-up. So you want to slow it down, you want to walk around, you want to stand for a little bit. So you want to slow it down. So the body can begin to kind of oxygenate again, and then it starts to eliminate the waste products, like I said. So it's basically, it requires that circulation to continue at that certain point. Also reduces the risk of developing stiffness. DOMS, DOMS, delayed onset of muscle soreness. So the muscle soreness that you will feel the next day or the day after will be reduced if you cool down and if you do the post-exercise stretch. And that stretch was 30 seconds. So what do we do for stretching? So these are the stretches. So definitely, if you do it before, is it going to hurt? Not really. Is it effective? Less likely based on research. Afterwards, though, you definitely need to stretch, because why is stretching important is because the muscles are in a very high state of activation. The muscles are in a contracted state because of the activity, and they need to be stretched. If they are not stretched adequately, then definitely there will be a lot of soreness and pain, which lasts for at least a couple of days. Hey, hamstring stretch is the first one. Again, it's a dynamic standing stretch. Is a good stretch, but if you're not able to do that stretch on standing, then the next one that you can do is on a chair like that. You can hold on for balance if you're doing that put your leg up on a chair or a stool or a bench. seated down. If you cannot do it in standing, seated stretch. If you can sit down and do the stretch like that, you can lean forward. The amount of leaning forward will determine how much stretch you can get, so you can control that stretch. The quad stretch, we already went over that. Quadratus also is one of the big muscles that that you need to stretch. You can do this lying down, putting one leg on the other, and then basically stretching out. It covers a huge area of that lower back and that region. So definitely good stretch to do. Calf stretch, definitely everybody should do this after any exercise, or definitely after the 5K, because we use our feet more often. So if you are especially, like we were talking about, the shin pain that people feel, especially after walking for long periods of time, is sometimes because the gastroc je calf म्हणतो आपण हे मागचा जे भाग असतो lower legचा, that calf is actually very tight many times. If that muscle is very tight when you're walking, then the other muscle that is supposed to help you take a step, supposed to kind of improve, take a step forward and let your heel put the leg in front, gets more stressed out because it has to pull against this tight gastroc. So basically, this is one way you can stretch. You can lean against a wall and you can stretch your leg, back leg like this. The one on the bottom one has a lot of research to support that stretch. You can do it on any step. Obviously, the way she's doing that stretch, we wouldn't technically recommend that, because you want to hold on to something and the step has to be pretty secure. So hold on, and then the back of the leg, the heel is hanging off the edge of the step. You feel a good amount of stretch on the back. In the first one, and I think so in the first, this one actually, if you bend the knee, you feel the stretch on the smaller muscle in the calf, which is called the soleus. So you can kind of stretch that muscle, because there are two muscles in the calf. One is a gastrocnemius म्हणतात. This is a big muscle in the calf, and there's a small muscle called the soleus. This is all is part of the lower back of the lower leg, नीचे खाली. And so when you bend the knee like this, it stretches one part of that calf muscle. And the leg that is stretching is obviously the one in the back. And to stretch the bigger one, the gastroc, you can actually do the same thing without bending the knee. So if you do this on a step or any kind of elevation, it's a good amount of stretch. So I ask my patients to do this because, again, it's a good stretch, easy. You don't need equipment. You can do it on any step. Plus, it is supported by research to be more effective. Hey, this is one, you can stretch your hip muscles. You can cross your leg basically and lean forward. You can stretch the hip area region. Hey, adductor, which is the inside of the hip, inside of the leg, inside of the hip rather. So that's an adductor stretch on this the bottom screen. You can spread that leg apart basically, and you allow for a gentle stretch on the opposite leg. So in this case, this person is stretching their left leg. So they're stretching their left leg by leaning away like that. So that's the inside of the stretch. So the adductors can actually, groin injuries hota, just soreness hota, that's basically the adductor stretch right there. And that's all I have. Recommendations, CDC and ACSM check guidelines, whatever I used, these are references, these are websites from there, and you can share these later. Any questions? Anybody wants to go back on any slides?
Thank you so much. I never did stretch and tone after the exercises. It is so important. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Anand, it was a very wonderful and informative presentation. फक्त एक क्वेश्चन होता की ही कॉपी तो आम्हाला शेअर करू शकशील का विशाल सोबत, कारण इट्स मोस्ट व्हॅल्युएबल इन्फॉर्मेशन आय कुड सी. आय गेट इट फ्रॉम लास्ट 10 years. म्हणजे मला पहिल्यांदा आय रिअलाइज दॅट की हाऊ इम्पॉर्टंट इट इज प्री वॉर्म अप, पोस्ट stretches and the strength training exercise. Really, thanks a lot. Thanks, Vishal, for having this excellent session.
Hey, thank you.
We'll share this copy.
एक प्रश्न आहे डॉक्टर आडवडकरांचा, आणि if he himself can ask, that is better. Otherwise, I can ask. डॉक्टर आहे का? त्यांचा प्रश्न
हा
होता.
माझा प्रश्न होता आनंद, की आपण ऍटलीस्ट मी सूर्यनमस्कार मारतो as much as possible every day at least, but कधी नाही, पण at least 15 minutes or so I would say I do exercise, the Surya Namaskar part. So does that meet or does it satisfy any of the recommendations in terms of moderate exercise or physical strengthening, or I mean, does it have any place in those recommendations?
It does. It does help in stretching. Definitely, Surya Namaskar is a great way to stretch the back and work on lower leg and everything, calf muscles, the neck muscles, shoulder, everything. So it is definitely helpful in stretching, strengthening from a core strengthening perspective. म्हणजे हे जे planks वगैरे करतात लोक to strengthen their core muscles. I think it helps strengthen the core that way too. From a cardiovascular point of view, I don't know if it will meet any of that aerobic exercise guidelines. Again, remember the guidelines that I've talked to you about aerobic exercise were specific because we were doing this for the 5K. So that's more the heart rate recommendations, right? So the Surya Namaskar, what you're asking basically is good from that perspective for a core strength and stretching, but obviously it may not meet the target heart rate guidelines. So it might be a good starting point for you to initiate the aerobic exercise from that point, I think.
Okay, thank you.
अजून कोणाला प्रश्न?
आनंद, राहुल बोलतोय. खूप छान माहिती आणि फारच व्यवस्थित सांगितली, त्यामुळे बऱ्याच गोष्टी कळतील. मला असा प्रश्न आहे की आता हे विशालने सुरू केलं, त्यामुळे बरेच जण आम्ही प्रयत्न करू 5K पळायचा. फार कधी गेल्या 10-15-20 वर्षामध्ये पळलो नाहीये. तर म्हणजे स्ट्रेचिंग आणि हे सगळं ठीक आहे, पण इज देयर एनिथिंग एल्स फॉर समबडी लाईक अस हू नेवर had attempted running like this in last 10-15 years, let's say?
If you're not attempted running in the last 10-15 years, I definitely be cautious in initiating running quickly. Running is not the only way to get aerobic exercise or get that exercise. You can definitely do brisk walking. If you're already walking, then maybe you should look at walking speed. How much right? You can calculate that walking speed by looking at how much time it takes for you to cover a certain distance. Can you increase that walking speed enough to increase that heart rate based on the target heart rate that you can get? If you can do that and if you can maintain that, there is really not need to run. If you can run, that's great, but not everybody can run because of a lot of orthopedic issues, other issues or whatever. So running is not like the end all of it. I'm just saying if you are able to walk, then you should walk at a brisk pace and you should be able to meet that guidelines. But running, the one advantage in running is if you run, then your heart rate is automatically getting up to the target heart rate, and it's a good exercise. But it's not the only way of doing it. I don't know if that helps.
हा, ते झालं, पण माझा प्रश्न असा होता की फक्त हे 5K आता जे येतंय महिन्याभरामध्ये, ते जर करायचं असेल, दॅट्स अ गोल, समबडी हॅज टू अचीव्ह दॅट गोल अँड ही हॅजंट रन फॉर लाईक 10 years. तर त्यासाठी काही स्पेशल काही करायचं का? हे तुम्ही आधी सांगितलं की स्ट्रेचिंग आणि प्री वॉर्मअप केलं आणि दॅट शुड बी इनफ फॉर समबडी लाईक दॅट.
No, so the warm up and the stretching is a indivisible part of the effort. But 5K can be done with a good amount of fast walking too. You don't have to run for the 5K. The way I put it basically, I didn't put preparation for the 5K run. I put a 5K walk and run /walk/. So if you can walk at a faster pace and maybe even do a very slow jog, kind of like a fast walk, progress to that, not even running, but even almost a very brisk walk to the extent of that it's almost like a slow jog, you can do it. If you can do it periodically do a little bit, walk slower, do a little bit, walk slower, that's also a good way of doing it. But even otherwise, if you're only able to walk the 5K continuously and walk at a fast pace, I think that should be good.
Thank you, Anand.
Yeah, because again, remember the completion of the 5K, if you're able to complete the 5K, even if you require a rest break, is itself an achievement. It is itself from a cardiovascular standpoint, from a heart and lungs and muscle standpoint, it is an achievement. It is a good thing. How you do it, how much time you do it, these are all different factors. right? But it's not doesn't have to always be at running pace.
नाही मला तेच की बरेच जण प्रयत्न करतील आणि म्हणून आपल्याला त्याच्यातनं काही वेगळे प्रॉब्लेम्स होऊ नयेत म्हणून माझा प्रश्न होता की ज्याचे पण बरेच जण प्रयत्न करणार आहेत आणि दॅट्स अ गुड थिंग. सो
and you should never this is a good way of doing it. I always encourage, I wish I was there available. If I could, I would have definitely done the 5K because I'm in India. I'm not there, but don't get drawn into any kind of movement that because of the person next to you. The person next to you may be used to doing that exercise and start to run. You don't have to. If you go to the gym and you see somebody doing 150 pounds of bench press, you're not going to start doing that just because somebody never ever get into that kind of thing because it can cause injuries. And Pushkar, when I sometimes used to go to YMCA, people trying to match what other person is doing or lift weights in a wrong way. That's not a good thing.
बरोबर, अगदी बरोबर. थँक्यू.
आनंद, थोडासा लाईट तू कॉमन इंजुरीज वरती टाकू शकतोस का? म्हणजे आय थिंक कारण का बरेचसे जण दे आर जस्ट सॉर्ट ऑफ स्टार्टिंग 5K.
Right.
So
the most common injuries, especially in any walking or running, are ankle injuries. Ankle injuries because why? Because the surface is not always flat. There can be uneven hip depending on how the things are previously. So ankle injuries are the most common. So always recommend good shoes, support shoes. Chappal किंवा sandal वगैरे असे हे it's a higher risk for ankle injuries. Ankle injuries, you should always watch out for sprains. If you cannot put weight on the leg, if you get hurt and you cannot put weight on the leg, you cannot stand on it, then you should not continue doing the walking or running, because inability to put weight on a leg after injury is a serious thing. Inability to put, if you put weight on it and it hurts, but you're able to put weight, that's not what I'm saying. If you cannot put weight on the leg, if you get hurt, especially around the ankle area, then you should not put weight on it. If you suddenly hear like if you hear like a loud pop or something, that is called an Achilles tear, then you should definitely, that is a medical issue. Ankle injuries can happen, so stretching out will help. Knee is also another area. Sometimes people have groin pain when they walk. Sometimes people have back pain when they walk because they bend over and walk. When they're tired, they are just somehow walking.
Right. तोच माझा दुसरा प्रश्न होणार होता की पॉस्चरचा इम्पॉर्टन्स काय आहे?
Posture's importance भयंकर आहे. You have to when you're walking, you walk straight. If you're running, you should always have an upright posture when running. As you get tired, you start to lean into it in your bend positions, and you start to kind of like somehow like start to like lean sideways. If that is starting to happen, then you should take a rest break, because again, if you're doing it in a very poor manner, if you're starting to realize that you're just dragging yourself, then you should take a break, because that's when the injury can happen. But that's common things. Common injuries, again, like just to recap: knee pain, ankle, sometimes groin pain, hip pain, back pain, sometimes arm pain too. I used to sometimes notice it if I was running, because of the arm motion continuously. Sometimes the shoulders start to bother, or the arms.
Yeah.
Stretching it across, like just doing a little stretch like that, or stretching it across like this. Tricep stretch, you can kind of do that. All of these stretches are just rolling the shoulders like I was showing you, and bringing the shoulder blades back.
Right.
Hey, these are all helpful.
अजून कोणाला काही प्रश्न?
विचारू का एक प्रश्न? चेतन बोलतो.
येस प्रशांत.
हाय आनंद, एकदम एक्सलंट प्रेझेंटेशन आणि थँक्यू विशाल फॉर अरेंजिंग. मला हा प्रश्न आहे की मी 2-1 वर्षापूर्वीपर्यंत साधारण 2.5 मैल 2.5 मैल वगैरे पळत होतो, फक्त वीकली वन्स. म्हणजे 2-3 वर्षाचा गॅप झालाय आता. तर आता ह्याच्यामधून म्हणजे पळण्यासाठी मी त्यानंतर मी जवळजवळ 15 पाऊंड वेट गेन केलेलं आहे, आणि प्लॅन्टर फॅशियाटिस आणि अकिलिस टेंडनायटिस असे दोन्ही पण आहेत. पण ते असे ह्याच्यात डॉर्मंट आहेत. आता काय मला करंट पेन मध्ये नाहीये, पण मला खात्री आहे की मी असं काही केलं तर म्हणजे ऍडव्हेंचर होईल ते. सो त्याच्या प्रिपरेशन साठी मी काय वेगळं आत्ताच करायला पाहिजे, किंवा शुड आय टेक एनी पर्टिक्युलर प्रिकॉशन देअर?
So the biggest thing for everybody would be to start increasing the activity gradually towards that. So if you have not walked or not done anything, आता weather थोड़ा improve होता है सध्या. So most people are not going outside to, I'm sure some people are now running or walking. So I would say gradually start doing some part of it every day. 5K is 3 miles. So if you're covering that 3 miles, you should have a target in mind कि by this time I should be able to walk at least 75-80% of this distance, or at least close to that. Or otherwise, if you can do that entire thing, that's great. So I would basically start doing the walking and then increasing the walking pace while also incorporating the warm up and definitely the stretch. तुला जे हे प्रॉब्लेम आहे प्लांटर फॅशियाटिस आणि ॲकिलिस, that is, you should definitely work on stretching the calf muscles, then that stretch that I was talking about on the step. हे जे calf muscles म्हणतो आपण मागे, these stretches will help you kind of walk better and maintain prevent it from injury. If you increase the pace too fast, or if you increase the distance too fast, there is a big likelihood that you can probably get the injury. But recommendation is to start slowly and then progress it gradually. So that way, by the time you are able to participate in the 5K, you are ready for it.
ओके, थँक्यू सो मच, अप्रिशिएट इट. फारच मस्त झालं प्रेझेंटेशन. थँक्यू, व्हेरी इन्फॉर्मेटिव्ह.
येस, ते खरोखरच खूपच सुंदर झालं सेशन. एक लास्ट क्वेश्चन माझा आहे. स्ट्राइड लेंथ, त्याच्याबद्दल काही तू सांगू शकतोस का? म्हणजे
स्ट्राइड लेंथ मध्ये दोन हे भाग आहेत. स्ट्राइड लेंथ एक तर हे व्हेन यू वॉक की यू वॉन्ट टू, म्हणजे यू डोंट एक्झॅजरेट.
ऑप्टिमल काय पाहिजे
जे लँड होतं ते, that's basically that you want to make sure that you're using the heel to land.
Right.
Stride length, there is no optimal stride length, but you want to basically the stride length that you're comfortable with. If you are excessively increasing the stride length, then you are likely to get hurt, like to get injuries. If your stride length is shorter than normal, what happens is the hip muscle, it doesn't get enough of a stretch. So if the hip muscle doesn't get enough of a stretch, then it doesn't get strong enough to kind of take the step. So if you are always walking in a short, or running or walking in a shorter stride length, your hip muscle over a period of time can get weaker. And in a lot of people who have not participated in running, or who otherwise do a little bit, most people have hip weaknesses, and hip weaknesses can also show up as knee pain and show up as limited ability to walk. So I would say strengthening the hip muscle and focusing on a decent stride length would be good. And it varies on who you are, how high, how tall you are, and what your this thing is. So it varies. There's no optimal, but it's optimal for each person.
नाही, थँक्यू सो मच. आय थिंक अजून काही प्रश्न नाही आहेत, तर परत एकदा धन्यवाद डॉक्टर आनंद फॉर गिव्हिंग अस सच अ वंडरफुल प्रेझेंटेशन अँड व्हेरी व्हेरी युजफुल इन्फॉर्मेशन. ही आपण रेकॉर्डिंग आपण युट्यूब वरती टाकणार आहोत. आपण फिटनेसच्या दृष्टीने होपफुली आपण काही अजून पण करू शकतो. म्हणजे आता आपण जस्ट वॉक आणि रन वरती मे बी आपण डाऊन द लाईन आपण अजून 1-2 सेशन्स तर नक्कीच करूया वेगवेगळ्या ऍस्पेक्ट वरती. सो
I would encourage everyone to participate and do it in a proper way, so injuries are limited. माझ्या या प्रेझेंटेशननी कोणाला काही म्हणजे इंजुरीज आणि रिस्क ऑफ इंजुरी कमी झालं तर दॅट वुड बी माय बिगेस्ट
नक्कीच
कॉन्ट्रीब्युशन.
यू हॅव कॉन्ट्रीब्युटेड. ऑलरेडी कॉन्ट्रीब्युटेड आनंद.
खरंच ऍक्च्युली परफेक्ट टायमिंगला सेशन अरेंज केल्याबद्दल खरंच खूप सुंदर, आणि माहिती तर एकदम वेल पेस्ड होती. त्यामुळे होपफुली सगळ्यांना त्याचा फायदाच होईल अँड एव्हरीबडी विल बी गेट प्रिपेअर्ड फॉर 5K. तर थँक्यू वन्स अगेन आनंद आणि विशाल फॉर अरेंजिंग दिस सेशन. वंडरफुल.
थँक्यू.
फारच सुंदर झाला. I really appreciate. Well paced, very elaborate and very informative.
Thank you very much.
चालेल, आपण हे सेशन एंड करूया. एक माझ्याकडून चूक झाली सुरुवातीला, मी आयोजकांचं नाव नाही घेतलं. म्हणजे या सगळ्या महाराष्ट्र मंडळ फिटनेस क्लब आणि आरोग्यधाम याचे सगळे जे ऍडमिन्स आहेत, म्हणजे मी आहे, केतकी देशपांडे, उल्का नगरकर, दीप्ती गोवर्धन आणि ऑफकोर्स प्रसाद अथनीकर आणि अख्ख्या MMC ज्यांच्यामुळे आपल्याला हा प्लॅटफॉर्म मिळतो. सो थँक्स टू ऑल ऑफ देम. If there are no more comments, I think thank you so much and have a nice evening.
a lot. Thanks, Vishal.
Yes, bye-bye.